Hi there, Matt Blick here from Beatles Songwriting Academy with a review of 3 books which are eyewitness accounts of the Beatles at work in the recording studio. First up, All You Need Is Ears by George Martin with Jeremy Hornsby. Summer of Love, The Making of Sgt. Pepper by George Martin with William Pearson. Here, There and Everywhere, My Life, Recording the Music of the Beatles by Geoff Emerick with Howard Massey. So let's just start off with a quick like-for-like comparison. All You Need Is Ears. Summer of Love. Here, There and Everywhere. The 22% that remain includes Geoff engineering Band on the Run, Free as a Bird and mixing Anthology, so pretty heavy Beatles content. Jeremy Hornsby was a Fleet Street feature writer, wrote a biography of a daytime DJ and a book about inventions. William Pearson wrote books about Vikings and fighter pilots. And Howard Massey was a producer, technical editor of Musician magazine and wrote books about various producers. Good points, bad points. All You Need Is Ears. It gives you an insight into how EMI was run in the 50s and 60s, how they resisted all forms of change. They didn't want to switch to LPs. They thought that was a passing fad. They wanted to stay with 78s. When Martin came to EMI in 1950, they were still mastering directly to wax discs and only using tape for playbacks. And they had rigid dress codes. One recording artist who was in the army was refused entrance to the front door because he was not an officer, he was a regular soldier, so he had to go around the rear entrance. All that stuff is a fascinating glimpse into history. It's also good for highlighting the meanness of EMI. George at one point had made the company £2.2 million profit, wanted to sign a new deal, and what they proposed was a deal where if he only made something in the region of £1.1 million, he would end up owing EMI money. Wow, bad points. The blurb on the front says the inside personal story of the genius who created the Beatles. Leaving aside the fact that he didn't create the Beatles, it's not inside, it's not personal. There's very little about George Martin in this book and very little about the Beatles. The Beatles take up 3 chapters and that's it. And the problem is what it's filled up with beside that. We have chapters on classical music. What is sound? What is stereo? How are discs made? What is producing all about? And how is it changing in this modern age? In a lot of these chapters, he comes across like a fusty old school teacher giving you a dummy's guide to sound recording. What is sound? It is the transmission of pressure waves. The human being receives these waves through his ears. Most people know that computers do very simple sums extremely quickly.
The question then arises as to why a particular frequency played on one instrument sounds different from the same frequency played on another. The answer is that the harmonics within the note are different for each instrument.
The disc played by a needle will soon become archaic. Discs will still be made, but they will be scanned by a laser beam. Soon there will be plenty of pre-recorded video cassettes of popular films and plays. It's aged badly, as you can see. Errors. It's filled with them. He can't remember what happened to the version of Love Me Do with Ringo on tambourine. He says he tried to get them to record How Do You Do instead of Please Please Me. He says he mixed Please Please Me on the same day as he recorded it. He claims that members of Deep Purple invented something called the gizmo. Now the thing about this is it's not really George Martin's fault. He's just remembering as best he can. It's the job of the ghostwriter or co-writer to check these facts out. It's very down on George Harrison. In fact, George Martin says that it was all about Lennon and McCartney, and he, George Harrison and Ringo were ultimately replaceable. And lastly, the writing is terrible. Judy and I drove straight back to our house in London. There waiting for us on our grand piano was a marvellous bouquet of flowers from Brian Epstein to congratulate Judy on Lucy's birth. They must have been sent some days before. They were very, very dead. And so was Brian. It's really good on life in EMI, much more than Martin's other book. It's very concise and focused. Pretty much each chapter covers a different song on Sgt. Pepper, and it's very revealing about his working relationship with John Lennon. Bad points are really, there's nothing much new if you've studied the Beatles, if you've read some of Mark Lewison's books or watched Anthology. There's not a lot of new insights. Here, there, and everywhere. Good points. It's very focused on the Beatles' recording career. Unlike George Martin's book, Geoff just takes 4 pages at the very end to outline what he really believes about recording and the future, and it's very interesting. And to be honest, every page is packed with insights or anecdotes about the studio. George Martin playing Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite over and over again on a harmonium, which he had to pump with his feet while he was playing, and in the end collapsing on the floor like a snow angel with exhaustion, because it was the equivalent of riding a bike for about 7 hours. It's great on highlighting the difference in the working approach of Lennon and McCartney, the dynamics of the band at work, their weird attitudes to food, including the infamous incident where Yoko Ono stole one of George Harrison's hobnobs and all hell broke loose. A lot of the credit that George Martin has received should really have been given to Geoff Emerick and the other engineers. So I was worried that it might be a bit of a character assassination of George Martin. But I think he does a good job in giving credit where it's due. He still speaks well of George Martin and the other engineers like Norman Smith and the Beatles themselves, but he doesn't pull any punches either. So it is pretty balanced and pretty fair, I would say. He also goes into detail about the meanness of EMI and life there, how he was refused the credit on Sgt. Pepper even though he won a Grammy for it, which EMI stole and said it belonged to the studio, and George Martin eventually persuaded them to hand it over. And when you think about groundbreaking things in music recording, Strawberry Fields Forever was 2 completely different versions, different tempos, different keys that were spliced together to make one. This is the man who held the razor blade and cut the tape and did that splice. This is the man that synced up 2 4-tracks for A Day in the Life. This is the guy. He was there. He did it. He covers a little bit of Please Please Me and With the Beatles, where he was around in a lesser capacity, but he engineered Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, the Magical Mystery Tour and Yellow Submarine stuff, part of the White Album, but then he quit, and then Abbey Road. So he was there for all of that. Bad points. Hard to find them. This is a great book. I really don't like all the Americanisms where you have English people speaking to English people dubbed into American. So biscuits become cookies, rubbish is trash. You ought to credit your American readers with a little bit of intelligence. It's quite hard on Harrison. He really puts a spotlight on his inadequacies as a guitarist, which is hard to take. You feel sorry for the guy. For me, there wasn't enough about Geoff Emerick. It was said of Liverpool manager Bob Paisley that he was so humble he didn't even feature in his own autobiography. And this is the case with Geoff. There is a picture on the back here, and that is Geoff Emerick behind George Martin. You can't even get a picture on the cover where Geoff Emerick is in the foreground. So I would have liked to hear more about his life generally. Maybe you wouldn't, but I would have done. Not enough about the Beatles, not enough about George Martin, quite boring. I wouldn't bother at all. Some good stuff here, very focused. If you can pick it up cheap, get it, but I don't think you'll learn anything new that you didn't know before. If you are interested in the Beatles or sound recording and want to know how a lot of the things that you do every day and take for granted started, I would highly recommend this book. It's well written, it's co-written by someone who knows what they're talking about, and it's very readable. There are links to all these books. Just click on them and that'll take you to Amazon. Thank you very much for watching. Come over and join me at Beatles Songwriting Academy for more reviews, deconstructing the songs of the Beatles. I'm in the middle of the White Album at the moment. Check out what I'm doing, leave a comment. The human being receives these waves through his ears. Organs